Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays in Stores podcast, which you can find right here on the Court Store Media Network. I'm your host, Kanaye, and obviously this episode is coming out to you guys a little earlier in the week on what is either going to be a Thursday evening or a Friday morning, just to be able to give you all enough time to watch this preview that I'm going to be putting out for UConn's upcoming matchup with the Illinois Fighting Illini in the Final Four on Saturday, April 4th, for a spot in Monday's national championship game against the winner of Arizona and Michigan. Now, I think it's just really cool how both Illinois and UConn have taken very different paths to get to the spot to play each other in Lucas Oil Stadium on Saturday in the Final Four in Indianapolis. And really, I'm just pumped for this game. Obviously, these two teams played each other earlier in the year on Black Friday, but I think it's fair to say you throw that game script out the window because these teams are completely different now as opposed to what they were back when they played each other in the non-conference schedule. Now, a lot to get into on this preview today. But before we do that, just a couple quick messages. First, us here at the Core Store, we've partnered with Phorm Energy to tell you about all the great products they have to offer. Whether you're someone who's an active gym goer, someone who just needs to stay energized, Phorm has the products that you need to be able to allow yourself to do that. You might also be interested in some of the fitness apparel they have to offer. And if you're interested in anything, any of their product directory, I'll be plugging the link to their full website in our description box below. On top of that, as always, just engage with the content on this channel in any way you can. It really does go a really long way. Whether it's liking, subscribing to the channel, or just telling other people about what we do here at the Core Storm, everything really helps in terms of being able to get more people to see our videos. And also, be sure to turn on your post notifications so you're the first to see our latest content. So let's get right into it. As I mentioned just earlier, these two teams played each other at MSG in what I believe was the Sentinel 1 Classic on Black Friday. And UConn won that game 74-61, but as I mentioned, these two teams are completely different right now as opposed to where they were when they matched up for the first time this year. Now, Illinois, I think almost more so than UConn, has been a completely dynamic team. Just the changes they made and the lineups they roll out, who starts, who comes off the bench, who plays a high volume of minutes, who doesn't, and just how they kind of play schematically on the defensive end of the floor. Those have been complete shifts that we've seen from Illinois from that moment when they took on UConn way back in November to where they are right now. Now, I think immediately what jumps out to me when I went to go back and watch that game and looked over the box score as well, Mihailo Petrovic played, I think, close to 20 minutes in that game. And that's a guy that Pat, after that game really has not seen all too much time on the floor for Brad Underwood in the Illini. I think another guy, I'm kind of in the same boat, was Brandon Lee. We saw Brandon Lee get an extended volume of minutes against UConn on Black Friday, which is, again, a guy who really doesn't play all too much for Illinois anymore. We saw Andrei Stojakovic start this game against UConn in November, where he comes off the bench now. He's obviously a really dynamic, instant offense type of guy who could come off Illinois' bench and hurt UConn on Saturday night. But he played in this game, and he was coming off an injury and obviously was not 100%. Keaton Wagler was not the Keaton Wagler that we know him to be right now, the second-team All-American, the guy who can go off for 40-plus in any given game. Kylan Basel was honestly the guy that Illinois ran all of their offense through, and that's obviously shifted over towards the offense being ran primarily through Keaton Wagler, as well as David Mirkovic as well. At certain points, we saw Illinois really struggle in defending off-ball movement. David Mirkovic and Keaton Wagler, they screwed up on a couple switches, one of those being Alex Karaban's three to make it 6-2 at the beginning stages of that game on Black Friday between these two teams. On the UConn side, they're very different than what they were in this game on Black Friday as well. We saw Jalen Stewart start, obviously, in a relief appearance, the stretch where Stewie was the starting guy at the three while Braylon was hurt and recovering from that ankle sprain that he suffered in the preseason. Braylon made his collegiate debut in this game off the bench, but he only played 10 minutes, and he played sparingly, of course, was in foul trouble. He only knocked down one shot. And obviously, Terrace Reed was still kind of battling back from that injury he suffered against BYU at TD Garden a couple weeks before this game against Illinois. And he obviously got into foul trouble. He played sparingly. I think he had 4 fouls in 15 minutes, and he struggled against the height and physicality of Illinois' front court. However, I do think it is important to mention, which is a point that I made in me and Josh's preview that we did for the overall Final Four just a couple days back now, in terms of just how I felt it was just such an uncharacteristic performance that we got out of Illinois in this game that both me and Josh were in attendance at, where Illinois just got completely out-rebounded. And when you consider that Illinois is probably the tallest team in the country and most definitely the tallest team left in the tournament field in the Final Four, it just so crazy to me how badly they got out-rebounded against UConn in this first game this year. I think that since then, they've been a lot better. They don't very often get out-rebounded. And when you consider that Terrace obviously was not 100%. It didn't play all too much. We saw Eric Rye would play a large volume of minutes. I think he logged 22, maybe 24 minutes against the Illini in the first matchup this year. That was something that was just so uncharacteristic of Illinois and Brad Underwood's team in this game. I just did not expect them to get a rebound in that fashion. And I highly doubt the rebound disparity is going to be tilted in UConn's favor as heavily as it was in this game in November. On top of that, I think Illinois just did not make their shots. They got a ton of great looks from beyond the arc and just could not make a single one. Kylan Boswell was really the only guy who could get it going offensively for the Illini in November. And I think it's just really unique because you consider that Silas Demery who is, of course, the point of attack defender, the best guy on the perimeter that you can throw on the other team's best player this year for the Huskies. He was guarding Kylan Boswell in that game. And now he's going to be matched up on Keaton Wadler. You would expect the guy who guarded Kylan, the guy who had 25 points in the game and was the leading scorer across the entire game, he's not going to be guarded by Silas. I assume, someone else on the perimeter for UConn, either Braylon or Solo, is going to take that assignment because Silas has to guard Keaton Wadler with how dynamic Keaton has been this year. We've seen the big scoring performances. He's a second-team All-American. He's just such a tough matchup problem for so many teams because of the height he possesses at 6'6", 6'7". He's dynamic off the dribble, just so good at absorbing physicality, absorbing those blows and spinning over to his left shoulder. That one move he had where he spun off his defender and was able to get a 3-point shot off that he made. And really just sent the Iowa defender off the screen frame if you were watching on TV, which he's going to be a tough matchup. He's going to be a tough guard for Silas, but I do think Silas has the tools, assuming he is closer to being 100%, the way we really haven't seen him this NCAA tournament. I think Silas has the tools to be able to win this matchup on the defensive end of the floor. Silas plays physical, which obviously Keaton does tend to use to his advantage against some more physical guards that end up defending him on the perimeter. However, I just think Silas does such a good job of getting under guys. He loves pulling the chair out. He's just so witty with how he's able to, kind of get his hands on the ball, force those jump ball, change of possessions, poke the ball out, get some steals. And I think that while Silas has obviously been playing hurt and doesn't necessarily have the explosiveness that he had in the regular season, I do think that Silas, it plays in his favor when he has to guard someone that's not as much of an athlete and more so someone who's going side to side, because I think Silas is going to be able to do that despite him struggling with the ankle injury that he's suffered since the Big East Tournament Championship now. I think another big spot that is going to be a major emphasis for UConn in terms of their chances of being able to win this game is, of course, I mentioned the point guard spot. Silas really needs to win that on the defensive end of the floor. But I think obviously at the power forward spot, Alex Karaban needs to have a big game. And that's honestly been a theme throughout the entirety of the NCAA tournament up to this point for the Huskies, where they've played so many teams that rolls out a more traditional four-man. Illinois has Davin Mirkovic. And in that first matchup, I mentioned the struggles that Illinois had communicating and off-ball coverage, and Mirkovic admittedly wasn't terrible defending Karaban. Karaban didn't have his best game against Illinois at the Garden. However, I do think that Karaban's going to get the opportunity to see some really good looks like he saw against Duke, like he saw against Michigan State, like he saw against UCLA, but he needs to make these shots. Now, I worry that Karaban is drained. Cam Boozer took a lot out of Alex Karaban. I think a lot of that can be attributed as to why we saw Karaban struggle shooting from the floor up until he hit that one massive three against Duke this past Sunday. Now, I worry that AK, who's definitely going to be at a size disadvantage against Davin Mirkovic, Mirkovic is going to look to post him up. He's going to look to go over his left shoulder. And I just worry that Karaban, he's going to have to deal with that physicality down low. And I hope that doesn't drain him all too much to the point where he's too tired to be able to knock down some of these better looks that he is probably going to end up getting in this game. Now, I will say that Davin Mirkovic is not the most athletic guy at the four spot. He's lower center of gravity, doesn't leave the floor all too much. So I think that plays into Alex Karaban's advantage on the defensive end of the floor, where AK is going to be able to just kind of go up strong, wall up, and be able to hopefully block some shots or at least alter the shots that Mirkovic is able to get off. Now, I think the third spot that is really going to be vital for UConn's chances of winning this game is at the 5. Obviously, Terrace Reed has probably been the best player in this NCAA tournament. However, this is probably the largest front line he's had to have gone up against at this point. He's got to go up against Davin Mirkovic. He's got to go up against the Avizaj brothers between Zvonimir and Tomislav. Tomislav obviously starts. And I mentioned Illinois is the tallest team in the country. They don't often get out rebounded the way they did against the Huskies back in November. And Terrace Reed, he needs to come out and play with toughness and needs to continue what he's been doing, because I just think that's going to be such a crucial point in this game. I think Illinois is going to try to force UConn to take a lot of the tougher jump shots, considering that UConn has just not shot the ball all too well this tournament. A lot of people are going to be blinded by Mullins' game winner, and very understandably so, was arguably one of the greatest shots in the history of the NCAA tournament. However, that shouldn't cover up how the shooting deficiencies that UConn has struggled with, not only in the tournament, but just the entire year overall, where the shooters have not made shots. Solo, his wrist is obviously, there's something there that we're not really being told about. I think the injury with that was announced earlier this year. I think it's something that's a lot worse than what we initially expected, and he's obviously dealt with some confidence issues, some above the shoulders aspects that's definitely lets him not being able to make the shots we saw him make last year in his sophomore season. Mullins, obviously, he's been really streaky throughout the season. We've seen how good he can be when he is on, but we've also seen how tough games have gone for Mullins when he's just not able to make shots from the perimeter, like against Furman, like against Team St. John's in the Big East tournament. So I think Illinois, they're going to look to force UConn to be a jump shooting team on Saturday night. Now, obviously, they're not just going to let these guys shoot open threes, but they're probably going to double off of Solo. They're going to double off of Mullins, like we've seen other teams do this NCAA tournament, and just force them to make shots the way they haven't this entire season. And if you think back to this game in November, I think Solo Ball did a really good job in taking advantage of attacking late closeouts. He was really able to attack closeouts and get to straight line drives to the basket. I think he converted on 3 layups in that game, one of them being an and one, tough finishes around the basket. He also was able to attack those closeouts and get to that kind of 15-foot, 10-foot jump shot spot that he likes in the mid range that he was able to knock down pretty consistently. Honestly, despite him struggling from beyond the arc, he's been able to hit a lot of these mid-range shots throughout the season. So I think that's something Solo Ball's going to need to look to do. I do hope that Solo is kind of able to get some momentum going off of the curls, which he was very successful in doing in their first matchup against the Illini this year, where he came off those curls and knocked down, I think, 2 threes off those opportunities, one of those threes being an and one 4-point play. So I think you got to look to try to do that. I think you got to look for AK to just, tire Mirkovic out with running him all around the floor. I think we're going to see minutes where Jake Davis is defending Alex Karaban, who, I think Jake Davis has been one of the most instrumental pieces in the Illini turning their season around defensively. And when you really consider how well Illinois has played throughout the, entire duration moving forward, following this game against UConn, I think this game changed their season. They needed to understand how to better execute on the defensive end of the floor, how to communicate over ball screens, how to communicate off ball coverage. And Jake Davis, I think, again, has been one of the driving factors of it. He just added a level of toughness, a winning just championship factor that Jake Davis plays with. I think he's going to be a tough matchup for UConn on the defensive end of the floor. I mentioned, just a couple seconds ago, he could probably see some time guarding AK. I think we could also see Ben Humrickhouse guarding Karaban as well. Both guys who possess good height, good length, with their wingspans, and someone who could, 2 guys who could definitely probably keep up with Karaban. However, AK, Hurley, and the staff, they love running those sets where they have Karaban run. I mean, around 2-3 times maybe, and then you have him coming off a curl, set a slip screen. And I think those are going to be the actions that really are going to be able to put UConn in a good position to win. It's just a matter of AK converting on them, which, we hope he will. Hope he's not too tired following having to guard Cam Boozer for a good portion of last Sunday's game. And obviously he's going to have his hands full guarding Mirkovic down low in the post as well on Saturday night. Now, honestly, on the defensive end of the floor, this is a lot more of a tougher conversation, where Illinois is the number 1 offense in the country right now. The way they've played this tournament has been completely, I think just different from how they played in the regular season, where they have not really been challenged all too much in the NCAA tournament. That's not to spite the teams they played. I just think Illinois has taken advantage of other teams breaking with how much Illinois' defense has improved and how well they've played on that end of the floor. It's allowed their offense to be able to go on runs. Illinois, during the season, was not a great defensive team, but right now, as it stands, they are a top 20 defense per KenPom. And as I just mentioned, they're the number 1 offense in the country per KenPom as well. And I just think with the dynamic shift they made in running offense through Keaton Wagler as opposed to Kylan Boswell, it just changed everything for the Illini. They love running that 2-man action between both Wagler and David Mirkovic, and that's been so successful for the Illini and how they've been able to get out to these large leads in the NCAA tournament. They beat Iowa 71-59 in their Elite Eight game to get to the Final Four in Indianapolis. And I think, 2 of the biggest factors in this game for the Illini were both Keaton Wagler and what they got out of Andrei Stojakovic on both ends of the floor when Stojakovic was on the floor coming off the bench. Now, Stojakovic, I think, again, has been one of the most instrumental pieces in how good Illinois has gotten so quickly since regular Big Ten regular season play has ended to where they are right now in the Final Four. I just think the strides he's made defensively, where we saw glimpses of it earlier in the season, back when they played Alabama, I thought the job he did guarding LeBaron Philon, Aiden Holloway, Latrell Wrightsell was really, really impressive. And I think just the minutes they got where he was guarding Bennett Sturts in the Elite Eight, I think Stojakovic did an outstanding job. And he's just a great downhill driver. He's someone who can get paint touches, finish around the rim. He has not been the most efficient shooting the ball this year. However, he can definitely still knock those shots down. And I think Andre Stojakovic is a tough matchup for UConn defensively, where I assume Jaden Ross, when he is on the floor, probably comes in around the same time Stojakovic will come in, when both those guys are able to come off the bench and get into the game. And I think Jaden Ross, that's going to be a key matchup for UConn to be able to win. I think Jaden Ross needs to try to deter Stojakovic with some of his physicality, some of his athleticism. Stojakovic, again, is really good at finishing towards the basket, but I don't think he's the most athletic guy that you're going to find across the teams left in the Final Four. So I think Jaden Ross can definitely win that matchup on the defensive end. However, when you bring Jay Ross in, that definitely leaves UConn at a little bit of a disadvantage offensively, despite how well Jay Ross has shot the ball for most of, the better part of the last month now. I think, again, Illinois defensively is going to force UConn to be more of a jump shooting team, where they're going to try to cut Terrace Reed off when they try to establish him in the post down low. And obviously UConn's offense has been completely ran through Terrace, establishing him early in the games, as I just mentioned, and him just getting so good at processing the game. That's been one of the biggest faults or things that people have pointed to regarding Terrace and what it's going to take for him to reach a ceiling. And the last couple of games now, he's just made some great reads. He's recognized the double teams like he did against Duke and dished out for, the 3 massive assists he had against the Blue Devils last Sunday. And I think, there's a good chance he's going to see some double teams on Saturday, but I also think there's a good chance that Brad Underwood just lets his guys go one-on-one defensively against Terrace, where you have Tomislav, you have Zvonimir, you have Mirkovic, all guys with size, with physicality. But I don't know that the line I've gone up against a physical center like Terrace really since the last time they played UConn this year. So I'm really excited to see how Terrace handles that matchup. I think he's going to be in a good position to be able to win with how good his footwork has gotten over the last 3-4 game sample size now. He's trying moves that, as I mentioned on last week's episode, I've never seen him try. It's getting very Sonogo-esque, and we obviously hope he keeps it up. Obviously hopes he can play above the shoulders really well and recognize when he's getting double teamed, when he's getting trapped, and pass it out to a shooter. And it's going to come down to shooters making shots, man. Mullins needs to be on, Karaban needs to be on, Solo needs to be on. And, oftentimes we see that there are moments throughout a season that kind of just make things click for teams. And I hope that comeback against Duke, that game winner that Braylon hit, is the thing that gets the shooters going. Because, again, for UConn to have a legit chance to win on Saturday night, they got to hit threes. They got to hit threes. There's no other way to get around it. And I hope that's, Braylon being able to see that massive shot go down despite him having a really rough start to that game against Duke just gives him the level of confidence he needs to let it fly. Good shots fly, I should say. And hopefully the ball will see the bottom of the net and go through and put UConn in a really good position. Obviously, I think Solo, as I talked about earlier, is going to be a big factor too. Him being able to attack closeouts. You can get into that mid-range area, hit some of those tough jump shots that Illinois is definitely going to try to force UConn to take. Karaban obviously needs to win that matchup at the 4. And I think if UConn does those things, they're locked in on the defensive end of the floor where Silas can stay in front of Wagler, not get in foul trouble, which is a big aspect. You get good minutes, defensive minutes from Malachi and Big Eric when Eric's in the game and Smith is in the game. Jaden Ross defending Andre Stojakovic off the bench. It's going to be huge. Terrace, manning the paint, pulling down the boards, finishing around the basket the way he has for most of the tournament outside of the game against UCLA. UConn's got a good chance to win, but there's obviously a real possibility that Illinois, who's definitely, for my money, looked like the better team the last month than UConn. There's a real chance that they win this game on Saturday night and they play for the national championship on Monday. But I like UConn's chances too a lot going into this game. And they beat Duke, they got through Michigan State, got through UCLA, got through Furman, make it to a Final Four. Anything can happen. Now, before I wrap things up here, I kind of just want to preface one thing. Regardless of outcome on Saturday night, regardless of outcome on Monday, should they win on Saturday, I think it's important to remember how spoiled we've been as UConn fans. Just to think back to the back-to-back national championships, the one in 2023 where they just got so hot at the right time following a tough loss to Marquette in the semifinal of the Big East tournament in 2023. The go on the run they had where you saw Tristan Newton emerge and Sonogo be as dominant as he was, Jordan Hawkins not miss from three, Andre Jackson slamming home dunks in transition, really winning his first title, bringing one back for the first time since 2014. And then the following year in 2024, we see what arguably is the greatest college basketball team of all time, where you send four guys to the NBA, you blow through the tournament with the largest point differential in tournament history, and you beat Zach Edey, the National Player of the Year, and did Purdue in dominant fashion. Obviously, last year was a little bit of a down year for UConn standards, but I still felt that we were privileged with seeing some really good games played out. I mean, Baylor, Gonzaga at the Garden, the Jimmy V Classic. I understand there was a tough loss there against Creighton in the Big East tournament, but that was still a great watch nonetheless. Think back to towards the end of the regular season that year, Caravan nailing the dagger at Gamble against Marquette to sweep them in the regular season, lock them in on that 3 seed line in the Big East tournament. And, to give the eventual national champion Florida Gators their probably biggest test of the tournament on their way to winning the Natty, and to come back this year and build the roster that Hurley has. And obviously, I would be lying if I said I came into a lot of the episodes this year at Big East play with a lot of energy, but when you think back to the amazing non-conference schedule that UConn played and how they only came out of that with one loss to Arizona, down two starters, a 4-point loss, I should add, and just see the wins they had against BYU, against Kansas, against Florida, Illinois, Texas, and then obviously to, for the most part, roll through Big East play. Obviously, they hit some bumps in the road, and they were challenged. I shouldn't have said roll through, but it prepared them for the moments that we saw against Duke, with the moments we saw against Michigan State. And, I understand, the losses to Marquette at the end of the year or at regular season, the loss to St. John's in the Big East tournament championship, losing Silas for 2 games following that. It's all been tough, but it's battle tested UConn. And I still believe deep down that no team is as battle tested as UConn is, in terms of the teams left in the Final Four field. And, I think no matter what the outcome is on Saturday night, I'm going to look back on the season very, very fondly. And I think it's important to remember, it's just to appreciate the run that we've gotten out of this team when a lot of people, including myself, honestly just really didn't know if a Final Four was going to be in the realm of expectations. I mean, you have to consider UConn hasn't even played close to what their ceiling, really should be this year with the offensive firepower that on paper they had coming into the season. We expected Solo Ball to be a better shooter than what he has been. We expected Braylon Mullins to be a little bit more consistent. Silas Demery, I think we would have expected to be a little bit more assertive with scoring on his own. Caravan to be, I can't really fault too much on Caravan. We kind of know what the deal is with him at this point. But I mean, seeing the growth from Terrace, seeing the growth from Jaden Ross, seeing Mullins hit that shot last Sunday, which I'm still not over. It's all things that you have to appreciate. And again, I just think we've been spoiled as Husky fans the last 4 years. Just to see the run that Dan Hurley and this program have gone on, it's something that should not go unappreciated. And, it's something that, again, regardless of outcome, I'm going to be very, very happy with how the season went overall. And, I really hope that there's going to be another preview episode coming out on Sunday morning to you guys for the Huskies' potential trip to the national championship game, which I think right now I'll hit on that really quick schedule going forward. As I just mentioned, if UConn does win on Saturday, I will record an episode on Sunday morning and get that out to you guys previewing their matchup in the national championship against whoever is the victor of the Arizona-Michigan game. If UConn's season ends on Saturday night, there will be a recap episode that me and Josh do of the Court Storm podcast. Either way, if UConn wins or loses, there will be a Court Storm podcast that goes up that me and Josh do on Sunday. But again, if UConn loses on Saturday, there's only going to be the Court Storm episode that goes up recapping both Final Four games, and you probably won't see a Saturdays and Stores season, kind of tournament recap until probably next Saturday. Again, hoping for a Husky win, get to the Final Four, just 2 games, anything can happen. Huskies got to come out hot on Saturday to beat the Illini, and hopefully maybe we'll see something similar to what we got in 2024, going 30-0. So again, hoping for a Husky win. Let's go. Super hyped for this game. Should be a really, really good one to be able to clinch a spot in Monday's national championship game. But until the next episode, I'll see you all next time.